I was 10, 11, 12, I don't remember, in line for the movies. And there were two guys in line in front of us, like 3 or 4 people in front of us holding hands. And my mother pulled me to her, not my siblings, just me, and looked at my father and said, "They're weird," which just made me look at those guys. And I went, oh, now I get it. I'm weird like they're weird. And I looked at them and I thought, they look happy. They look like they're in love.
Let's go hand in hand.
People say what's on their mind.
I think that it is a cardinal sin to lie to the American people about war.
Partisanship is a version of narcissism.
In downtown San Francisco, the Commonwealth Clubs and Forum curates events that bring you face to face with the world's changemakers.
1/3 of the wage gains that women have made since the 1960s were made as a result of the birth control pill.
Twitter is a technology that I don't think we've seen before in this world.
Since 1903, the most innovative leaders have come to the Commonwealth Club to share their vision.
Sharing cars, sharing their homes, sharing. A shared dream, a shareable American dream. That could work.
You each can play a role in helping us chart a better future.
Housing and health and education and policy all live close to the surface in us when our children are murdered. It's all the same story.
We bring together the visionaries shaping the emerging trends in technology.
It was a combination of instant and telegram. It was the idea that you could take a moment in time and you could capture it and you could just send it out and broadcast it with the entire world.
I just threw this site together in about a week when I was at school.
Oh, great.
We've got angels, we've got incubators, we've got accelerators, we've got seed funds, we've got crowdfunding.
We eat, we drink.
One of our first dates ever, we pickled like 100 pounds of herring and made 300 pounds of sauerkraut.
Wow. Yay!
We never shy away.
75% of the people of this country want universal health care and expect it. And damn it, let's go.
Concentrated, deep, slow, loving, tender, passionate sex.
Whether you want to be on the cusp of current events or feast on skipping, Inform events are fun and action-packed.
I have an anthropology scarf that does that twisty thing, so.
Come feed your mind and soul and celebrate the future with Inform.
I love San Francisco, and every time I come back here, I remember that this is the only city in America that has magic.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's virtual program with Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Maisha Battle, and I run Sex for Life LLC, a sex and dating coaching practice here in San Francisco. I also co-host the podcast Down for Whatever. I host the podcast Down for Whatever, and I co-host another podcast about dating called Dating White. I am delighted to be in conversation tonight with Nancy Jo Sales, author of the new book, Nothing Personal: My Secret Life in the Dating App Inferno. Nancy, a New York Times best-selling author and contributing editor at Vanity Fair, has written extensively about how dating apps have changed our romantic and personal lives in innumerable ways, and we're going to get into that tonight. In Nothing Personal, Nancy shares her memoir of experiences in the digital dating age and her advice for other people trying to navigate this new world. Before we start, I would like to remind the audience that if you want to ask a question, please ask it in the chat or comment section. We will try to get through as many questions as possible towards the end of this program. So let's get started. Hi, Nancy Jo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. You are joining us from New York and
Yes.
the apartment where a lot of your book takes place. So I was really excited to see you in this space. Where so many influential things happen to you and with you. So thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the book.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be talking to you and to be at Commonwealth Club, because I mean, I just sort of, sometimes have like imposter syndrome where I see, the people who have spoken here, and I'm just so grateful to Commonwealth Club to be here to talk about my book with you, who I've been learning so much about lately. And I love your work so much. And I'm going to make a t-shirt that says commit to the.
Thank you.
And I'm going to especially wear it when I go on dates. I want to wear that when I go on dates.
I mean, I think this will be a big hit. Whoever makes this t-shirt, please knock me some cash. I'll actually forward it on to All Bodies, which is the platform where
you
I
should
teach.
You should do the merch yourself.
I could. There are actually these amazing now like 3D models of the clitoris, which I think are really helpful because a lot of people still think that it's a tiny pea. But
well, as you know from reading the book, I found out that there's a lot of men, especially younger men dating in the digital age, who don't seem to know where it is or what it is or how it works.
That's right.
Yeah. And
you have the patience of a saint.
I said, one of them, I just said, okay, so no judgment, but can you just point to it? Can you just point to it? And he said, just point. You don't have to touch it right now. Just point. And he said, isn't it inside? And I was like, well, inside where? Like, what do you mean by inside? Where? So when I was a little girl, I talk about this in the book, I would go to the library. I was a big reader. You see, I'm, like books.
Yeah.
I love books. So I was a big reader, and I grew up in Miami, in a suburb of Miami called Coral Gables. And I used to go to the Coral Gables Public Library, which is this beautiful old Spanish style architecture building in Coral Gables. And I would go there. And when I started to get interested about sex, it was the 70s. So I took out the book, The Joy of Sex. And I remember going and hiding in the library because I was afraid someone would see me with it. I was probably like 8 or 9 and reading it and finding out so many interesting things. It's a little sexist, that book. I mean, it was a groundbreaking book in a lot of ways. It's a little sexist. No need to go into why. But anyway, so I remember reading about the clitoris and finding out like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. And then, finding out more on my own. And never hearing anybody ever talk about the clitoris. Like, it was such an important part of sex, I found out, for people who are, born the way I was born, in this type of body and with these parts. And yet I never heard anybody say it. I never heard anybody refer to it. And it seemed almost like a dirty word that people didn't even want to talk about. So when, and that's a big problem going way back. So when I saw your work and I saw this kind of celebratory and all the wonderful humor that you bring to sex positivity, I just love it. I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I saw so much of myself in your journey. So I kind of want you to know that you're an honorary member of the sexological community, because to write a book about the things that you write about, which are not, this is memoir, right? And it's delving into pretty much every relationship that you've had, which spans, pre-dating apps, right? Kind of coming of age in the 70s, learning about sex and the sexual revolution, and being kind of an active part of that. You mentioned the Spiral Cafe as being this hub for people.
The Spiral restaurant,
yeah, part of this counterculture movement.
Yeah, my mother was a beautiful woman. Like, I mean, beautiful is one of those words that it's like a challenging word sometimes to apply to women, but it's important to note that she was an incredibly beautiful woman. And that brings with it its own challenges too, because, when I was doing my book, American Girls, Social Media and the Secret Lives of Teenagers, I found out that girls who, that there's that old, ad that people make fun of, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. But actually, girls who are considered more attractive have a lot of sexism and sexual harassment and stuff directed at them too. And so she had a lot of things going on in her life that weren't great and were difficult to deal with. And she married my dad, who was a mixed bag. He got better as time went on, but he was in those days not a great husband. He was a domestic abuser, which he completely atoned for later as he changed and learned a lot by reading and getting kicked out of the marriage and stuff. But anyway, so she was unhappy. She was, unable to eat. We didn't call it anorexia back then, but she was very, very thin, not eating well. She told me much later that she was constantly being sexually harassed by all kinds of people in her life. And, it was just difficult. But then when she was 37, she met this man who was 27, who she fell madly in love with and is still with to this day. And that's like 50 years later. They're about to have their 50th wedding anniversary. And he was a hippie. Back then we called them hippies. He had a big beard. And he was this 27-year-old guy, and he was kind of trying to make it running a health food restaurant. We called it health food back then, but it's health food. It was macrobiotic. And he was really into this whole idea of the yin and yang of macrobiotics. And anyway, it was called the Spiral because of the yin and yang. And it was a kind of a center of hippie culture in Miami in the 1970s, which I didn't really realize as a child. I just thought it was like my mom and my stepfather's restaurant. But it was a place where all the young folks hung out, and there was a line every single night. It was this little tiny place. And it was, all the young women who were the waitresses wore Indian print skirts and no bra, and it was that kind of place. And everybody wore sandals and nobody shaved their legs. But, it was just cool. And there was a lot of LGBTQ. We didn't call it that back then, but there was a lot of like open gay culture going on. And I grew up in this environment. Now, there was also a lot of sexual revolution type sexual talk and sexuality going on, which as I got older as a young girl, getting to be like 11, 12 and developing, bodily like pretty early, resulted in a lot of sexual harassment of me. And I didn't, my mom had been through this stuff herself, but she was like Midwestern and didn't really know how to talk about this kind of stuff. So I never talked about it to her. And in fact, this book is the first time I've ever really talked about it to anybody. The kind of stuff that happened to me and happens to girls still to this day, unfortunately, in families and schools and work situations that they might find themselves in. And it was weird and uncomfortable, and I never knew how to deal with it. And I wrote about that because I thought that it informs dating. Like, the reason I bring it up is because you mentioned the restaurant and everything, and like you think that these people are really progressive at this restaurant because they're hippies and they're liberals and they're supposed to be like cool with everything. And no, but wait a minute, like that doesn't necessarily apply to how women and girls get treated, and still not, And so it was stuff that we didn't even talk about, and things would happen, and you'd just be like, what am I supposed to do with that? And it informs you from the earliest age into how you relate to, if you're straight, like I am, I call it cursed with straightness. If you're cursed with, I do, I'm sorry, but yeah, that's how I see it. Cursed with straightness. So if you're cursed with straightness like I am, then, you start to develop like along the path towards date, when you're eventually going to be dating and dealing with people in a dating situation, you've already got all these weird experiences that have happened to you that inform how you're going to react to stuff and navigate stuff.
Right. And I mean, I think that also ties into how you were able to sort of like be involved with, but also be sort of adjacent to dating culture in your work. Even as a young journalist, being sort of assigned to look into dating trends and to kind of investigate these things of what's happening with women and feminism. That was kind of your beat, so to speak, early on.
Yeah,
but
teenagers.
Did
kids.
you feel like that? Yeah, did you feel like that afforded you some ability to talk more openly about your experiences, even with colleagues, or to bring that forward in the journalism that you were producing at the time?
I think a lot of adults have amnesia for youth, and it's because I think it's a lot of times so painful, and messes you up, and you don't want to remember, and also you want to think that you got past it. And not all adults, but I think a lot of adults have amnesia for it, and they just don't remember, and they can't relate because they think they never went through it or something, and they can't remember that they actually did. But I somehow, for some reason, I'm right there. Like, I never stopped feeling like that 12-year-old girl. And so when I got assigned stories, like interviewing 12-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls or 15-year-old girls, whatever, and then I did that book about social media and girls, I knew what they were talking about because I could remember, and it hadn't changed a bit. Like add these, and add these platforms that was in a lot of ways making a lot of this worse because it was more public and it was more of it. The harassment, the bullying, the kind of sexual expectations, the body expectations, the expectations of like how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to be and be sexy, the sexualization, which we had coming at us from magazines and television and Brooke Shields, like nothing becomes between me and my Calvins. I love Brooke Shields, actually. She's great. But, she did that ad and it was 14 and I was 14 and I'm like, oh yes, I will be like that, and the sexualization that you get in Love's Baby Soft lip gloss, and you have to, there was a lot of real like pedo type culture around my childhood that was very celebrated. And so it freaked me out at the same time that I think it influenced me. And so when I would go and interview girls and they would tell me stuff, I just remember what that felt like. And I could like relate to them. And sometimes when I was doing the book, I would go back to my hotel room and I would cry. Because it was like I was reliving it. Because they would tell me about like, something happened to me online, like this guy just asked me for nudes and, and I didn't know what to do. And, I know that there's like lots of debate about nudes. Are they good or are they bad? But a lot of girls that I've interviewed feel a pressure and an uncomfortableness with the whole thing, with not knowing, because nobody talks to them about it, not knowing how to react, not knowing what to think. What does this mean? What nude do I take? I'm in sixth grade, they're getting these requests and stuff. So I just felt really connected to them on some level because of what I had been through. And I felt like finally I needed to talk about that to some extent because it is connected to dating. It is. It's connected.
Right. And I feel like the work that you did, the groundwork, we can call it, of, first writing this piece about, our dating apocalypse.
Right. That was a quote, by the way. That was a quote. And I'm not correcting you. I'm just saying, like, some people were like, dating apocalypse? What dating apocalypse? People are still going on dates. It was a quote. It was in quotes in the headline. It's in quotes. Somebody said it, and it was an ironic thing that this young woman said to me. She called it the dating apocalypse, and then we thought it was funny. My editor thought it was funny, so that's why we called it Tinder and the Dawn of the Dating Apocalypse with quotes. But then you know how Twitter and social media is and everything. It just became this thing of like, people were so threatened by that piece. It came out in 2015, and I still to this day don't understand the big reaction to it. I don't. It immediately went viral, and people all over the world were emailing me and DMing me and saying, it's just like that here. And I'm talking about like people in like Indonesia and London and Sweden and like all over the place, Buenos Aires, and like all over the place are saying, it's just like that here. It's just like that here. Well, nobody is dating in the same way. Yeah.
There's a very like yes and tone to the book, to your book, that I think is hard for people to wrap their brains around. And I think going back to, the piece, the dating apocalypse piece that like blew up, I think that people didn't want to see that this tool that we were inviting into our homes could have negative repercussions on our romantic lives, because we were in this mode of like everything is getting better with technology. And I think what you do so well is talk about, are there people who are on dating websites looking for love? Yes. And is it very difficult to not succumb to hookup culture? Yes. Are there positives to people finding communities where they may not have been able to find partners and community and connection before? Yes. And is there still a problem with sexism and racism and homophobia and assault? Very much so. Is this thing helping us? That's really on an individual level, I think, for people to say. But you bring forth a lot of statistics that show that things are not getting better in the time frame between the advent of mobile phones and social media to right now, as compared with previous data. That's what we know. We just know that. So I think that's really hard for people to have that sort of perspective of, could there be these benefits, but also these drawbacks that we really need to be thinking about and be critical about? So those are my thoughts on maybe why it blew up so much and why you got the backlash.
I think you're right. I think you're right, because what my critique is, if anything, it's a corporate critique. I'm like kind of the lone wolf out there, like howling at like the big dating, as I call it. Actually, there's a friend of mine.
I've never heard that before.
A friend of mine called it that. My friend who's a journalist, and she's so smart. I don't want to say her name because I don't know. But anyway, she's so smart. And no, I don't know. She's like private. She might not like me saying it. But anyway, so I was talking to her about all this stuff, and she's one of those people who can just like put like the pithy spin on something and like the little terminology that's so perfect. And so she's like, it's like big dating. It's big dating, like big pharma, meaning that these are companies that are corporations that their whole, PR is that they're going to make you well and they're going to help you. But so much of the time they're doing quite the opposite, because they're really about profit. Like big pharma is supposed to get us well, but a lot of time they're just trying to sell us pills that we don't even need, caused in the opioid crisis and stuff like that. Did you see that doc on HBO? I think it's the new Alex Gibney doc. It's amazing. Is it Gibney or Gibney? I don't know. He's so brilliant. Anyway, so big dating is the same thing. It's like the marketing is so powerful. They do marketing really great, and they tap into very deep needs and desires of people to have love, to have connection, to have sex, to have fun, to have companionship, to find someone. They tap into it so well, and they make you think that that's what they're going to get you. But that's not really how their businesses are even designed. And like in 2015, when that piece came out, we weren't yet in what we now call techlash. And so, now since Cambridge Analytica and the election of Trump and everything, and Mark Zuckerberg being hauled in front of Congress and all these things that have happened, these investigations into, the labor practices at places like Google. Now, the faith that people have in big tech has dropped, right? And that's even borne out by studies, So, but for some reason, it still hasn't overall translated into how people look at the dating industry, which is exactly the same, and is doing things that absolutely they need to be held accountable for in this exact same way. They need to be held accountable for such things as no age checks. I mean, it's insane. It's absurd that an 11-year-old girl on Badoo who was on Badoo in this country, and I don't mean to trigger anybody. I know some people are very disturbed by talk of sexual assault and rape, and if I'm going to talk about that now, I don't want to upset anybody, and it upsets me too. That's exactly why I do the things, talk about the things that I talk about. It's because it upsets me so much. But that's why we have to talk about it. So a couple weeks ago, this 11-year-old girl on Badoo got raped in her weeks or months ago. I don't remember, but I saw the alert on my phone like a couple weeks ago by a 26-year-old man who met her on Badoo in her backyard. And then her father only found out about it because he thought something was up with her, and he started looking at her messages on Facebook and found out. So this is not some isolated thing. There are lots of kids on these apps, and they're on them. That's another thing I totally understand, and I write about in my book. If I were a 13-year-old girl right now, I would be on Tinder. I would make a fake profile and I would go on Tinder, because my culture sexualized me to think that, like, hey, let's talk to some 35-year-old guys, because that is what is happening. And that is exactly how I got raped. And I'm not saying it's my fault, like it is the rapist's fault, but as a 14-year-old girl, sexualized, my friend who was like the risk taker said, let's go to the University of Miami and talk to some freshmen. And one thing led to another, and I found myself in a situation, not my fault, never the woman or the girl's fault, ever, ever, ever. But I went there because I'm just trying to make the comparison. This is the same reason why you say, well, why are those girls on there anyway? Because our culture tells them that they need to be sexy and like attract men. And that's what they're doing. And and also they might just be talking to them because they want to have that kind of adventurous experience or something. But even a conversation with someone age inappropriate can be very damaging. And there are a lot of pedophiles on these apps and predators. And that's like the worst part of it. There's no age checks. They do not do anything to kick these people off, and they have to. That's like the dark corner of it. But then even into, how they make you feel every day. Like how they just kind of like exhaust you and wear down your self-esteem. And anyway, I don't mean to go on about that. I feel like I'm derailing your question. Go ahead.
I think it's really important that we talk about how the apps are using us. I mean, we use them, right?
Yes.
But big dating is collecting data, using our data, and also impacting how we are able to match. So through the use of algorithms, we're seeing, of course, and there were very early studies on this, racism, sexism, homophobia, a lot of things are kind of getting, I would say probably inadvertently at the beginning, baked into algorithmic matching.
Well, the Cornell study from 2018 that I talk about in the book, Cornell did a study 2018. It's in my bibliography in my book, or you can just Google it. They did this big study that showing how the algorithms are essentially racist. And it's not just that they're racist because they sell you people like the way Zappos sells you shoes by this kind of thing of assuming that because you like white people, I'll show you more white people. Because you swiped on some people of color, I'll show you more people of color. It's like
right.
It's like dating segregation. But the other thing that's messed up about it is that they allow people who write blatantly racist things in their profiles under the guise of sexual or racial preference or something in dating to be on there. And to me, it's just, I mean, forgive me for assuming something because I am not a person of color, but I defer to you. But isn't that just like some kind of weird Jim Crow racism in dating to say like, no such and such people, no such and such people? And that is to me offensive for any person of color to go on there and see that. And I think a person who does that should be immediately kicked off that app permanently. But they're on there and it's just considered, part of dating. It's your preference.
Right. And
I'm sorry, you
not
say.
only is it considered part of dating per se or preferences, but I also think that there's a lot of rhetoric around, if you're there, if you're using it, which these things are obviously ubiquitous, right? Dating apps are, one of the reasons why I have a job. Like I help people to understand like how they're relating to the app and how to help themselves like make it work for you to the best of their ability, right? But the reality is the rhetoric is if you are there, it's just an extension of real life. And so things that happen in real life also happen on the apps. And we can't
I don't
control
accept that.
Right.
I don't accept that. And I'll tell you why
your
in a
book
second.
does a great
Go ahead.
job of sort of like explaining why that's actually not the case. I actually have some information underlined, and like my little note next to it is like yeah, so the founders of Tinder saying we always saw Tinder, the interface, as a game.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if you match because swiping is so fun. And so everything is really set up in the interest of the game, which is
it's
kind of
gamification.
mind-blowing to me. And there's not, like you said, there's not a consideration of is this racist or is this not, or is this increasing racism, is this increasing colorism, is this increasing sexism, misogyny, etc. Because the assumption is, well, people would just be doing this in real life to each other. We're just providing a forum. And, you know, it's hard for me to grapple with some of this stuff, even as someone who works. Well, I mean, on some level, I know this, and I talk about this on my podcast, Dating White, like Black women are the least desirable, et cetera. We know this because, you know, dating app statistics, but it's just,
but the algorithms
really
are
difficult
racist
to grapple with.
It's you know what's hard for me to grapple with, and I totally agree with you. It's hard for me to grapple with the fact that they don't care. Big dating does not care. And I know that because they don't do anything about it. They don't respond to things. They don't do anything about it. There's all kind of things that they could do. They just keep promulgating this idea that you just said that, well, it's just like real life. And, you know, when I interviewed Mandy Ginsburg, who was then the CEO of Match Group, no longer, but she was, and I did a film in 2018. I directed a documentary for HBO called Swiped, Hooking Up in the Digital Age. And I talk about it
It's great.
in the book too. Thank you. And and I did it. That's what the book is about too. I did it while I was going through menopause and like reinventing myself and like broke and going crazy and trying to make a film for the first time. So the book is also about it's like this very crazy 5-year period of my life where I was trying to do juggle a whole lot of things at once, plus date on dating apps that I was also reporting on and doing a film on. And it was a very intense kind of time. That's what it's about. So she says, well, I said, well, you know, hello. She says, well, we're doing everything we can to make the apps safe for women. I was like, whoa, what are you doing? She's like, well, we have information in the you know, down in the all that stuff that nobody ever reads. Don't ever go in someone's car. Don't ever go in someone's car. Don't, you know, make sure people know where you are. Don't ever, don't ever drink. I was like, and I'm sitting there thinking like, do you know what dating app culture is? It is drinking. It's drinking before you go on the date. It's like, so that you can handle the weirdness of it. It's drinking when you're on the date. Not every single person. Don't at me. Okay. But it is a lot of drinking. It's drinking so that you don't have to feel weird with this total stranger. You know, it is going to their house or going to your apartment, or in my case, going to my downstairs gym because I didn't want to bring these guys up into my space with my daughter, you know? So because I would never do that.
Nothing personal wins for most sex scenes in a gym, a basement gym, and a rooftop.
Rooftop.
Very creative.
Well, we have lounge furniture up there, and the gym has.
Don't let your neighbors read this.
That's so funny you say that. I have been hoping they won't, because even though it was a few years ago that this all happened, I really don't want them to give me those looks in the elevator, because I had sex on their lounge, some of them on their lounge furniture. Because anyway, I hope they don't see this. So, because the communal lounge the communal lounge furniture has no cushions, but the people that have their own little area, it has cushions. So, but they weren't home anyway. So they were on vacation. They do Doctors Without Borders. Anyway, so I where was I? See, you have to laugh, right? Because it's also absurd. But what was I saying about big dating?
From
big dating
the Bumble CEO.
No,
The
that
Bumble
was, she was the
CEO
Match Group.
who-
Oh yeah, yeah. So she
Match
says,
Group,
it's
right.
just, it's just like a bar. It's just like a bar. It's not like a bar. It would be like a bar. They love to say that. It's just like a bar. It's just like real life. It would be like a bar if there was a bouncer at the bar that said, the algorithm that said, white people over there, people of color over there, and if 30% of women who went to that bar got raped. Because ProPublica did a survey in 2019, 2020 even, talking about how they surveyed 1,200 women who had been on online dating dates in the last 15 years, and 30% of them had been sexually assaulted. And of those 30%, 50% had been raped. And the dating apps, and what is even worse about it is that the dating apps had nothing in place to do anything about it, to even report it, because they don't have to, because of Section 230 is that aspect of internet. I mean, talking in San Francisco, everybody knows what Section 230 is probably, but for those who don't, it's that aspect of internet law that makes it, so that third party companies are not responsible for the actions of third parties on their platforms. So they don't have to do anything about it, and they don't care. Or they would do something about it. But why don't they care? Because what they want is more and more and more and more users. And all the tech people who are in the audience know what I'm talking about, because some tech people have actually reached out to me. People who work in big dating have reached out to me and said, off the record, anonymously, I'm conflicted about what I do, because I know that a lot of this is true. And every single time there's an ethics question, it comes up against the people who deal with growing the users.
Acquisition.
Right. And they have to get more and more and more and more users, because that's how they get to this place. This guy said they call it in his company the waterfall, where they get more money, they can go public, all this kind of stuff. And so you don't want to kick off pedophiles, and you don't want to kick off rapists, and you don't want to kick off people who send dick pics, and you don't want to kick off anybody, because you need these people to show your investors your numbers. So this is a very bad faith proposition. And there are a lot of people who do meet the love of their life on dating apps. I'm well aware of that. But if we're going to have, and that's fantastic, I'm so happy for these people. But if we're going to be, have a real responsible society where, companies are held accountable, isn't that what we want, especially in intimate spaces where people can be really, really hurt emotionally and physically. I just think there's just a glaring lack of accountability. And that's why I'm out here saying this stuff. And because it happened to me too. It happened to me too. I was sexually assaulted twice on dating apps. I was not raped on a dating app date, but I was sexually assaulted twice. And one time it could have been a lot worse than it was. And I've talked to so many women that these things have happened to, and I talked to a young woman recently. She woke up, because there is so much drinking and hookup culture and dating app culture. She kind of passed out during the date. You drink a lot, you have fun, you dance around, whatever you're doing. This is what happened to me too. And she woke up and the guy was raping her on this date. And she's like 20, wonderful, woman in her 20s, great job. And now she's like traumatized and in therapy because of this thing that happened to her,
Yeah, I mean, it's so important that you brought that forward in your book, because some of the situations that you describe are not what the law would define as, assaults. But they're definitely moments of panic and awkwardness, and what do I do with this, and how do I understand this in the moment with another human being who,
Well, you mean that when the guy
for
stuck his dick in my face? That was assault.
The dick in the face. I wasn't quite sure where in the face, what was happening, if he was in front of you or what was happening there.
He was trying to basically use me like a blow-up doll.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And there were just, I think, moments of, I don't know. I think as a woman who dates men and who has been in an online been on online dates myself.
And you met a
the
good
times
guy,
when
right? You met a good guy.
I did. I met him through Tinder.
All right.
And he
And
was
then
also
how-
on Hinge.
And
But
that happens, and that's fantastic.
there were many who, I think I could see myself in those descriptions of like, am I safe? Maybe they turned out to be perfectly safe dates, right? But I think that we don't talk about our safety, everyone's safety, when we've created this monster of matching where we're also navigating a culture that expects that the people that you're having sex with are less than. And we actually have a question from the audience about why is it so hard to talk about these things, i.e. sexual harassment, with the people we are closest with when they themselves might have had similar experiences?
That is such a good question. Oh my
What
God.
are your thoughts?
That is such a good question. All I can tell you is that it changed my life when I finally did. It is just like so hard to carry it around. And you don't even realize how you're affected by it, like all the time. It's so hard because we're shamed. We're shamed, and we're made to feel like we did something wrong. We're made to feel like it was our fault. We're made to feel like we were stupid, or we were slutty, or we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Don't get in someone's car. All that kind of stuff. We're made to feel like we're dumb girls who just didn't, do like the smart girls do. Well, you know what? I've talked to some of those smart girls too, and then they'll tell you that like that's just the Instagram version of themselves, and they have other stuff that they need to unburden too sometimes. But why is it so hard? Because women are silenced through humiliation, and men too sometimes, but women especially, I think, are silenced through humiliation. They're silenced through a kind of humiliation that makes sexual violence more possible, because we don't feel like we can speak up. Even in the Me Too moment, a lot of the time, people feel like they can't speak up. And I want to change that. I have a doctor who's in his 70s, and he's a wonderful doctor. I absolutely adore him. And he's a great doctor. And but he's an old guy. And I went to him recently. I always take him my book whenever I have a new book out. And I brought him my book, and he was looking at it, and he was like, "Why did you write this?"
Why are you airing all your dirty laundry?
Right. He's like, "Why did you write this?" Like, and I told him why. I told him why, for that very reason. Exactly that woman or man, whoever it was, just said, person. Because I am sick of people feeling this way. I'm sick of feeling this way myself. And I think that I just want to destigmatize everything. Like, I did this thing, and, sometimes you get, like, I was always the kid at the high school dance who would be the first one out on the dance floor, I'd be the one who'd be out there like, and then like everybody else would start dancing. That's kind of a happy, silly high school version of what I'm trying to do with this, which is, and there are a lot of people who write about this stuff. I'm not saying I'm the first person or anything, but I do think that, and I've seen even from some of the reactions I've gotten from my book that there is still stigma, and there is still like slut shaming, and there is still, and I feel like, if I can be the person on the dance floor being like, I'm dancing, I'm telling what happened, and other people can feel like they can do it too, and it's not shameful. And then, I told my mother that I was writing this book, and I informed her, and we had a lot of conversations about it, and she never told me any of these things into her 80s, and she finally did tell me a lot of things that happened to her too. I had no idea. I feel like my whole relationship with my mother, my whole life would have been different if I had known what she had been through too. And it would have helped me to deal with stuff. And I'm not blaming her for not sharing, because she was so silenced You know, she was a 50s housewife. You know, she wore white gloves until she married the hippie. And let her hair down. But, you know, so she was silenced too. So I don't blame her. But then, man, when we finally had that conversation one day on the phone, and it was just like, okay, wow, I finally know who you are.
Right. It's freeing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Liberation. It's why in the early days of feminism, they used to have those, everybody get together in the living room and do those consciousness raising talks. And they would talk about stuff. And that was, my mother wasn't involved in any of that stuff, but I had a couple friends there whose moms were in those kind of groups, and you'd go and you'd like on your way to somebody's room to play, there'd be like all these women in the living room sitting on pillows and with these very intense looks on their faces.
Talking about feelings and experiences.
And clitorises.
Yes. We have a couple more questions come through.
Okay.
And, you know, you have this beautiful arc of the book sort of starting in COVID. You know, you start from the present and weave your past through it. And then we kind of end up in the present again. So this person's question is related to your opinion on what's going to happen with online dating post-COVID. Do you think this will bring about positive change? Do you think things will be worse? I know you did some reporting on like what has been happening with folks on dating apps during COVID, but what are your thoughts about post-COVID? Where are we headed?
So interesting you should say that, because I love filming. I love to film people talking. I love to interview people. I love to talk to people. And it's probably the thing I think I do best. Like that's my real, for want of a better word, gift is talking to people. And so I've been going out and I've been interviewing people, and I just with like this little camera that I have, and I'm going to do these cuts and put them on my website because I'm still interested in what's going on. So anyway, so like a week or two ago, I went out and I filmed it was this beautiful day in New York. Everything had just opened up. Every bar in my area, the East Village, was just full of people, full of kids, full of young people, and a lot of Gen Z type kids, young 20s. I talked to two groups, some young men and some young women, and there was a non-binary person in there too. And it was so interesting because, you know, Gen Z isn't really into dating apps as much as I think millennials are, perhaps. That's the sense that I get. It's more they more seem to be dating through Instagram, and mainly, you know, through hitting somebody up on Instagram. You know, these young guys were telling me, you know, if I see someone I'm interested in, we don't exchange numbers, we just exchange Instagram handles or whatever, you know. And so, but then they were also saying, these young guys were saying, they were all three straight guys. They were saying that they use dating apps when they just want sex. Now, I'm not saying that they just want to like have an easy, like boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, look, I'm not saying that every single guy uses dating apps that way. Don't at me. But I do think that is how a lot of young men see dating apps.
There's a distinction.
Yeah.
Between how those apps are being used.
They might go for, this is what I heard, they might go for an Instagram thing that's more of like a convo, and then more of a conversation, and they want to talk, and they want to, you know, maybe like do like a date. But dating apps are just to hit it and quit it. This is what they were saying. And I don't think that is going to change so much in post-COVID. I think the whole like vaxxed and waxed summer and hot girl summer, not my words,
hot vaxxed summer, yeah.
Hot vaxxed summer. These boys were saying hot girl summer. But this is the words they use. So I do think people, there's a sense of celebration and relief and just like wanting to get out there and bump uglies. Like, it's just like,
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say bone, but
bone, be touched, have some sex. And I am all about it. Like, I think that's fantastic. Now, as long as people treat each other with respect and don't make each other feel bad, that's the problem, right? It's not the sex. I've never had a problem with the sex. You know, I've been accused of being a slut and also being not sex positive. Like, I think that people really need to read my work and actually try and understand what I'm trying to say, rather than think what they hear about me or something sometimes, because I don't know where some of it's coming from.
It's the yes and. It's the yes and. Like,
what do you
both
mean?
things are true. Like, you
so
can want this. This is kind of the catch-22 of like, I want sex, but I also don't want someone to think of me as an object. And I think that objectification is something that you talk about throughout the book, of like,
and
what are we really doing here? If we're like in this zone of a game, then how do we translate the tool of the game, if we're just going to call it what it is, into something that like feels remotely like we're connecting in real life as two people, two human beings who have thoughts and ideas and feelings. And some of those are quite muddy and murky and weird. And sometimes we don't know what we want, but you know, we're still showing up as ourselves. We can't not be human. And, you know, a lot of the experiences that you talk about are like, people are being kind of tasked with that, of not having feelings and not being able to show up how they fully would like to.
Well, what I heard from these young women that I talked to, and granted, this was just one group, and I'll eventually put it up on the website so you can see. They were great. It's just one group, but I found, you know, I'm good at picking them. Like, they felt representative in a certain way. So the boys were all, I call them boys because they're like 22, 23 years old. And they were all, you know, they were all like talking about like, no relationship. No, I was like, what are y'all going to do this summer? No relationship, no relationship. It's hot girl summer. You know, like, that's what they were. Unsurprisingly, nobody's surprised about that. But what I did find surprising and very interesting was that the young women, and it was 4 of them, and one was non-binary, they were talking about how this is the summer of my friends. This is the summer of girls hanging out with girls. And we're going to be together and be girls and have fun just together with my friends. And I was like, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, my date is my friends. And they were all very adamant about this. And I said, well, why did this happen? Why do you feel this way? And they were really complaining about what dating was like during COVID, and how one of them had a relationship. Previous to COVID, it had been a situationship, no labels. And then during COVID, like happened with so many people, they started living together and had to actually deal with each other and like find out about each other and see what you're really like. And like this girl said, I didn't even want to be there. And then as soon as he got vaccinated, he went out and she said he messed up, you know. So there was she, and then one of them was just like, and this is her words, you can see it, it'll be on my website. She just said, I hate men.
Just straight up. Yeah.
Straight girl. I hate men. And I said, why? And she said, well, I think that what I have seen is that this culture of dating right now is not fun for a lot of young women, because it does privilege, if you're straight, it does privilege guys so much. And it's a matter of really, like, you know, feeling like you're not special and not respected. And who wants that? And also, once you get into bed with them, you know, it's not always so great. And I found that too when I had, you know, my experiences that I talk about in my book. You know, I had, you know, a few years of really good sex with one person that I did meet on Tinder. But there were challenges in other ways, because there was like a real, you know, there's that lack of communication, and he turned into a fuckboy. But I did have good sex with him, but I felt that there was a lot of bad sex that had to do with the hookup aspect of it all, and them not really caring whether you get off or not, or having a good time, and also porn. And so you wonder, like, why do these young women just want to hang out with each other and not go out with these guys who are literally at the next table going like, no relationship, hot girl summer. Gee, I wonder why they don't want to hang out with those guys. I wonder why.
Yeah, there's a disconnect there, but I wish them all luck. Like, I want them to all have the kind of summer they
totally.
want.
I love them so
Yeah.
much. I love them so much. Even the guys I love too. Like, there's something so incredibly endearing about that time of life when you're just like figuring it all out and trying to find out what what you want and how to get it. And I think technology is getting in the way. I do.
We have a question about that. So, do you think there's a connection between the fact that it's predominantly men coding dating apps? Do they provide any incentive to build apps that actually protect women from abuses? I mean, this is something that you talk about in the book, so everybody should buy a copy immediately. But also in Swiped, you have two people who you interviewed have a fascinating conversation, which doesn't produce the next groundbreaking app, but it is an interesting question of what if apps were built by women. So I will allow you to answer this person's question about like what you think the impact of men designing these apps is, and also I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's an app that would basically favor or privilege women.
Well, my answer to that is twofold. The one answer is, Silicon Valley, the tech world, it's no longer Silicon Valley, it's Austin, Texas, and it's New York City, is incredibly male dominated. We know this isn't some kind of like feminist, conspiracy theory. Like, there's just an abundance of data, and there's all kinds of, lawsuits that we can look to, sexual harassment lawsuits, a Department of Labor investigation into practices. We know that Silicon Valley big tech has a problem with sexism. Read Brotopia, Emily Chang's great book. There's just, going back to, I talk about in the book, the person who's credited with inventing online dating was also a guy who had a big porn site. So there's
literally porn.com, right? Or sex.com?
Sex.com, right?
Sex.com.
So this is not surprising to any of us that this is a male-dominated industry that needs to hire more women, to have more women in power, to listen to women more, to have women in all aspects of the creation of these things. And yes, as coders. And there was, I think, a blind study where women are shown to be even better coders, although they don't, like they hire now like violinists behind the curtain because there was like bias, and they showed that like, right. So when they did blind, like women actually code better. So I think, don't at me, but I think that they do. I don't have that study in my book, but I think I heard that. So yes, of course, everything would change. And don't think that just because Bumble calls itself a feminist dating app that there's anything feminist about it. It was not invented by a woman. It was invented. The whole idea came from Andrei Andreev, who is the Russian mogul who owns Badoo. And he went to Whitney Wolfe Herd and said, like, let's do Tinder, but like, let's call it feminist. He owns 80% of it. She owns like 20%. So, and I talked to like feminist dating historians who, like Zoe Strimple, this great British dating historian in my film, she says like Bumble just codifies that women have to do more work, more labor and more emotional labor. And, so I don't think that there are currently any feminist apps. I was recently reached out to by a woman. I'm not going to say who it is. It's a brand new app. It's getting buzz. She saw that I had been on some podcasts and stuff, and she reached out to me and she said she had worked at another big dating app for years. And she wanted to ask, she's a woman, and she wanted to ask me like she's the CEO of this new thing. She's like, how can we make it safer? And I was like, well, what do you have in place so far? What are you working with so far? Let's see what we can work with what you've got. She was like, what? Like nothing. Like nothing. And I was like, don't you know about all this stuff and all the stuff we've been talking about in this conversation. The rape, the sexual assault, the pics, the this, the harassment, the this. She's like, I wasn't aware of any of that. I was like, how is that possible? How is that possible?
It's hard
like,
to
do
believe.
you not read the news? Like, yeah, I think also they're in a bubble, you know?
Yeah.
She's like, well, at I don't want to say the dating app where she was. We just never heard about that. So I do think that having women would be better, of course, but that really like threw me. Like they have to be women who are conscious of this kind of thing. The other problem I think is that I just think there's a whole problem of mediating your intimate life through screens. I think that
difficult.
Yeah, I think it privileges the male gaze necessarily because that's the world that we live in. And I think that this idea that there's no other way to date is it's social conditioning, that it's the kind of social conditioning that they want you to think that there's no other way to date. We evolved for tens of thousands of years, right? And Justin Garcia, who's the research director of Kinsey Institute of Sex, said to me, yeah, this is the biggest revolution in dating and mating. That's what they call it, mating in sex research in 10 to 15,000 years since the agricultural revolution. It's happening in a nanosecond, and it's not something we've evolved to. It's a corporate takeover of our intimate spaces. It's not necessarily permanent. And this idea that it is permanent and that there's nothing we can do about it, that to me is a kind of brainwashing and social conditioning that they exactly want you to think. It's not true. It's just not true. You can meet someone organically. You can. And I think, instead of working for the man by, doing your data work that they want you to do all the time, doing your free labor for these companies, because that's kind of what it is all the time that you're doing. You're just doing this free labor, and that's why everyone feels exhausted by it. Just try to talk to somebody. Go out and meet somebody. How did people used to meet? They met through friends. I met my first husband. Well, that was a disaster. I mean, he wore a cape, so I really shouldn't have married him.
We have a couple more questions, so I want to make sure we get to them.
He wore a cape, but I met him at a dinner party. Like, have a dinner party.
I'm always shocked when I get the question of like, well, where can I meet people? That does happen when I do events, and I'm like, well, they're kind of all over.
Like, take back the power of your life.
But it's
be a person in the world.
Yeah, I think it is so ingrained, especially for people who grew up with this technology.
Well, that's another problem.
So, could big dating be targeted at a different kind of relationship, like platonic relations, and see better results? So I'm thinking, for instance, like Bumble BFF, or are all forms of connections on these apps faulty?
Well,
and then we have one more question too, so I want to make sure we get to that.
Look, it's not a binary. It's not like either or. Like it's all good or all bad. It's all black or it's all white. I'm not saying that like nobody ever has a good experience. Of course not. And like I just told you, I had a really good thing with somebody for like years. People say, like, well, maybe you just didn't do it right or something. I did plenty of it right. And we had a good time. But I think that the fact of the technology has destroyed trust. It's made it impossible for anybody to really know for sure if they can trust somebody, if somebody is... Look, the other thing is the addiction element of it. I smoked cigarettes like an idiot in my 20s and 30s. And when I get stressed out or I'm on deadline or, I don't smoke anymore now, ever since I had my daughter. But I still, to this day, it's like a heroin addiction. If I'm like stressed out, I want a cigarette. And I have to fight the want of a cigarette. If you get addicted to dating apps, and everybody does, it's impossible not to, because they've designed it so that you do get addicted. And that dopamine rush that you get from matches and stuff, that's rewiring your brain. So like, even if you get into a relationship with someone, as relationships are not always smooth sailing. the beginning can be quite fun and quite wonderful, but like down the road, years, it might take months, it might take years, you will hit a patch that's difficult. You will. And it'll be your challenge to see if you can get through that patch or not. If you have dating app addiction in the pathways of your brain, like I do cigarettes, when you might think like, well, her, or him, I'm going to go on Tinder, see if I can match with somebody. You know, you will think that. And I think a lot of people do. And I get so many emails and I get so many DMs from people who are like, what do I do? I found out that, my husband's on Tinder, or like I saw this on his phone, or it's not just Tinder, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, it's all these things. There's all kinds of like micro cheating going on, like all over the place, like all the time. So I think real good relationships are built on trust. And I think that most people would agree that that's true. And so I think that if you want to have a good relationship with somebody, you're going to have to figure out a way to cut this technology out of your dating lives together. And that doesn't mean like you can't meet friends. It's different, I think, because you're not worried about whether your friend has other friends. you want your friend. No, there's lots of people who are polyamorous, and I'm not polyamorous, but there are people who are polyamorous, and that's a valid choice. And if that's what you want to do and you're cool with all that, that's good. But lots of people are not polyamorous. Lots of people want to have their person and have their person be their person. And I think that this technology has just made it so much harder to do. And I think that like it's kind of common sense. A step towards having a really good, strong, intimate connection with someone is not having technology in your life with that person.
Final question. Thank you so
Okay.
much. When you say our culture decrees this or that, how can that be changed? So just a light question to round us out. Would more women in tech make a difference? You did address the last question, but I am curious about like, how do we change the culture of dating from here?
Well, I think everything is communication. I mean, culture, massage. Like I started to become aware as an adult how, and I really became much more aware as an adult writing this book, how much misogyny, which we can finally say is a word. Yay, we can have a word for it. It was systemic misogyny. I love saying it. I was told when I wrote American Girls not to use the word misogyny because it was too strong. I said sexism.
Sure.
So anyway, but as a mom, for example, and I'm going to relate this to dating in a second, I didn't want my daughter to grow up the same way that I did, like with no tools. I got tools. I watched like Gloria Steinem on Dick Cavett when I was little, and I really was like, okay, yeah, she was very cool. And Susan Brown Miller and stuff, I watched them on TV, and I picked up on all my cues, and I read stuff and everything. But I'm getting all this other stuff like Love's Baby Soft and Brooke Shields and their Calvins, and I didn't want my daughter to have no tools from her mom, like literally tools with which to look at this stuff. So I would start talking to her about it, and I wouldn't like shove it down her throat or anything, but just when things would come up and I'd be like, I don't want that to just like go in there. I want her to have a filter for that. I would talk to her about it. And it could be something so simple as like, we used to watch I Love Lucy in the morning when we were eating our breakfast. And there'd be the Hallmark Channel, which always had advertisements for ladies cleaning toilets. And they were always ladies cleaning toilets in like 2000 and whatever. Ladies cleaning toilets and like doing the same shit that they did in the 50s. My toilet's so clean, cleaner than yours, like stuff like that. And so I would just say to her, what do you think of that? Like, why are they fighting over their toilet? And she'd be like, I don't know, Mom, that's crazy. So, like just sort of, so I think the same kind of thing applies to dating in the sense that like, when you see this is really a bad example because it's like about terrorism, but like if you see something, say something, like if you see a guy do something, like see something, say something, like, and also you can find out about them. through doing that. Like, what do you think of that? Like, I remember the moment that I knew I had to get out of my first marriage was when he didn't like Thelma and Louise. Like, I just knew, like, he just like, we just had this big argument about it. And because a lot of people were like really shocked by that movie. And he said, well, they didn't have to kill him. He wasn't raping her when she shot him. And I was like, okay. Like, I just was like, that's it.
Wow.
You know, right. But these things come up, right? And I wish I had knew that before. So I'm just saying, like, there's these kind of, you know, litmus tests that you can run. And there's these kind of like, you know, to be fair and to be compassionate, like, we can educate each other about stuff. We can explain to each other why, and not in a threatening way. And not like, I never would sit my daughter down and say, now we will talk about feminism and learn about feminism. I'd never do that. I'd be like stirring the spaghetti and be like, what do you think of the such and such? You know, it's the same thing with dating. It's like, you can sort of like find out where they're at with stuff. And I'm not saying I was ever perfect at this or good at this. I mean, like, my whole life with men is like just one disaster after another.
Read the book. You'll learn. Yeah.
Right. But I learned. So
Yeah.
maybe by reading the book, you'll know it beforehand instead of after.
Right.
Every
Well,
dumb
thank
mistake I ever made, you can take that and like not do what I did.
And have a conversation about it, perhaps later with a loved
Well,
one.
can I just say one last thing? I
Yes.
got this wonderful DM. This woman, young woman, oh no, like 30s. She's reading the book and she gave it to her new guy that she met on Hinge. And
Amazing.
she's making him read it.
So I love that.
And they're
Yes,
talking about it.
Spread the word.
They're talking
because
about it.
You do such a great job of weaving in all of this data with personal stories, and I think that's really what makes the book so powerful. So
You're
I just
so
wanna thank
lovely.
you for the book.
You're so lovely. You know, you're just wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love
Yeah,
talking to you.
I'm literally going to be changing some of the recommendations that I have to my coaching clients because of this book. That's like the God's honest truth. It really has given me a lot to think about in how I
that makes me
guide
feel
my
really good.
clients through this inferno, because it really is. So thank you so much to our audience for great questions. And before we officially wrap it, it is a tradition here to ask our speakers the following question. What is your 60-second idea to change the world? I'm very interested to hear what yours is, Nancy Jo.
I didn't know I had to do this.
That's fine. You're not supposed to.
Oh my God, 60-second idea to change the world. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day, like, if I had my life to live over again and I realized what I know now, I would spend my whole life working on the environment. I really, really would. Because I think that's beyond dating, beyond anything. That's where we are right now as a planet. Like, you know, we're on this little ship and it's like, you know, we have this real problem. So I don't know what to do about it, though. That's not an answer. How am I going to change the world? I change the world. I guess I try and change the world by telling the truth about myself. And I know that that sounds narcissistic, but
I like both answers.
It kind of goes back to what that questioner asked, like, why don't we talk about things that are true?
Right.
And I find that every time that I do, and especially if I talk to others about it who are having the same problems perhaps that I have had, and we can, it doesn't feel so bad and it makes things better.
It's awkward, but then it's good.
Just tell the truth about yourself. Don't hide yourself.
There you go.
Let your what's that expression that we used to say? Let your freak flag fly. It's hard to say.
There you go.
Let your freak flag fly.
Thank you.
That's how you change the world.
Thank you for that. We all need that, especially during, this fantastic Pride Month. We all need to let our freak flag fly. So I appreciate that as our closing. So thank you to Nancy Jo Sales for joining me today at Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I would like to remind our audience that Nancy Jo's book, Nothing Personal, My Secret Life in the Dating App Inferno, can be purchased through your preferred bookseller. maybe a feminist small bookseller. If you'd like to watch more virtual programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making virtual programming, please visit commonwealthclub.org/online. And I'm Maisha Battle. Thank you, and stay safe.